And we're live. So hello, folks. Welcome to today's podcast, this being episode 417. A lot of episodes, Chili, and it's about time we get you on.
Yeah, glad to be a part of it.
You know what? I think Kyle was the very first... Kyle Lamb, I'm referring to. Obviously, you know who I was talking about, but it was the very first, I think, interview. No, that's not true. We did have one other dude on as an interview guest, but Kyle was probably our first high-profile interview guest on the podcast way back, like episode 77 or thereabouts. So
Wow.
That's been a while. And of course, shortly thereafter, came and did a training course with you and Kyle in New Hampshire. And I remember having dinner with Kyle and him talking about starting his podcast. And now he's got his show. It's been running for several years now. So, and I think you've been on his podcast as well.
Yep, been on his a few times. Just of course, all the hanging out, whether it's been going hunting or doing some of the classes.
Yeah, man. Yeah, lots of good hunting trips too. I know that has been had. Kyle would be a great guy to go hunting with, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, and because he's never going to run out of food.
True that. Well, and then he's got all the hookups too with all the good hunting spots, right?
Yeah, he knows his way around, and you look at him and you think, this guy's not going anywhere, but he'll move up and down those hills pretty well.
All righty. So just seeing folks pop in here, and so we welcome everybody. Looks like some of the notifications going out may be a little bit delayed because normally we'd have a few more by now. But hello, Tris and David and Rob. Thanks for joining, guys. I'm sure we'll have more of you, and we'll kick off the recorded portion of the show here momentarily. I'm just doing a couple behind the scenes things here that I realized I forgot about, such as looking and checking who our sponsors of today's episode are. That's kind of important. I don't know if you mind telling or answering Tris's question here, Chili, but he asked what unit you were in.
Well, I started out in the Ranger battalions and then worked my way up to Fort Bragg with the unit at Bragg, working with Kyle Lamb for multiple years.
Right. The unit. You guys, you did good work, I'm sure. Stuff that much of which you probably still can't even talk about, I imagine.
Yeah, it was a good long run. We did a lot of things, a lot of interesting things, and some things are out there in just general news, and then we just go about doing our business and doing what we need to behind the scenes.
Yeah, Tris responds with he was in 1st Battalion, and that's why he was asking.
Nice. I was there 89 to 91, and then I went to RRD in 91, and then 95. I was a free fall instructor, and 97 took the walk.
Nice. All right. Good. Okay, I think I got everything here behind the scenes ready to go. So, well, guys, let's kick off the recorded portion of the show then. Shall we do it, Chili?
Yeah, ready to go.
All right. Here we go in 3, 2, 1. This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, episode number 417. And welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast, part of the concealedcarry.com network. I am your host, Riley Bowman. And today we welcome a special guest, and I'll bring him on formally here in just a moment. But we have with us, should I say Craig Chili Palmer, or we just go with Chili?
It sounds odd saying Craig to me. Yeah, Chili's just fine. My wife calls me Chili, so.
I only know you as Chili, but anyway, we have Chili Palmer with us. Really, really great guy, and actually one of the consultants on the movie Extraction. Has been a big hit in recent history here on Netflix. So we'll get into some of that and talk about other things related to Chili's expertise, which is broad and vast. So we'll get into that, but first, today's episode is brought to you by Mountain Man Medical. MountainManMedical.com, of course, is the place for the best quality, non-fake, nothing fake, right? All legitimate, properly sourced medical and trauma gear. Check out mountainmanmedical.com. Some really reasonably priced trauma kits on that site, and I think you're going to really enjoy it. I've got Mountain Man Medical kits all over the place now. So in all the vehicles, on my workbench, I've got one tucked away in a bag just right over here. And then I use a lot of the same products in my ankle kit that I carry with me a lot of places as well. So genuine cat tourniquets and all of that. Check it out, mountainmanmedical.com. And today's episode also brought to you by the Foundation Belt, the belt of choice that I use on a daily basis these days, made by the EDC Belt Company. So check out the Foundation Belt, concealedcarry.com/foundation for a short link to that one. And I know you're going to love the Foundation Belt, all right, especially if you're an appendix carrier, but even if you're not. You might just need to shift it a little bit if you like to carry it 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, but the Foundation Belt is rigid where it needs to be and not rigid where it doesn't need to be, such as, say, the small back. So I found it increases comfort, and like I'm sitting here right now, and that flat spot across the back is not trying to be pinched in with this super rigid round object. So the Foundation Belt, concealedcarry.com/foundation. And we have a viewer, Michael. He says his Yellowstone trauma kit's on the way. So yeah, the whole thing behind the Mountain Man Medical line, Chili, is it kind of as a homage back to the Mountain Man days, which Jacob and I conveniently grew up in the kind of Mountain Man regions of the Rocky Mountain range. And so all the products have Mountain Man inspired names. Just a little bit of a backstory to the Mountain Man Medical line. So let's introduce our podcast guest today. We have, again, Chili Palmer with U.S. Army. Once upon a time, special operations, did a lot of crazy stuff, I am sure. And of course, as you and I were talking before we went officially live with the show about your background and working with Kyle Lamb. A lot of folks know Kyle Lamb because of Viking Tactics and his shows and all that stuff that Kyle has done. You've kind of been more in the shadows, but recently that's been changing more and more because you got involved with this movie called Extraction that has kind of been all the buzz. So, Chili, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, kind of how you got to where you are now in your life, and maybe lead into how this opportunity came about to work on that production.
Great. Yeah, so, I was one of those kids that just wanted to go in the military straight out of high school. Knew I wanted to be in the military. It was not something that I had to make a decision on. It was just really when. So went in the military, went in 89, went right to 1st Ranger Battalion. Then I was there, got there about 12 December 89. And of course, 20 December 89, we jumped into Panama. So that was my 9th jump, static line into Panama. From that, I was in 1st Ranger Battalion till through 91. And then late 91, I went to RRD. So the Ranger Reconnaissance Detachment there at 75th Ranger Regiment headquarters at Fort Benning, Georgia. Then I was there, in the as a recon specialist up until through beginning of 95. So January 95, I moved up to Fort Bragg for the military freefall instructor course, or not course, but as an instructor. And then we moved to Yuma, Arizona. Part of that move where they shifted the whole free fall school out west for better weather and everything that July. And my son was just born that June. So having grown up in Arizona, I never thought I'd be stationed close to my folks. So 3.5 hours away from my parents in Phoenix. And it was nice for a couple of years. And then in basically spring, summer of 97, I moved up to Fort Bragg after completing the long walk, and was there at the unit for my last 17 years in the Army. And I've known Kyle since 98, and he's been a team leader of mine on the assault team as well as within the recce team. So more family than just a friendship. So it's been great. And then before I retired, I was still doing stuff with Kyle as far as VTAC. So I was there when he started kind of with some of his products. I have one of his original slings he made that was very minimal, but I've got it in my little gun room because I think it's pretty neat to have. And then, started doing classes with Kyle really a lot in 06, 07. And then from that, continued with Kyle all the way through retirement, still doing VTAC, part of Sig Sauers as he went with Sig. And I still hold a day job. So, work for FLIR full time.
Busy guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that original sling that you mentioned of Kyle's, is that one that he made?
Oh, yes. Yeah. When he actually made it and stitched it.
Yeah, that's a special piece of history right there. So many people familiar with the VTAC slings, and of course we sell the VTAC slings on our website as well. We're actually really proud to sell all the Viking Tactics products that we do. So that's pretty cool to hear. Even that little piece, of an original model, like you said, minimalist. I am sure, Gen 1, if you will, but that's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, so I wore it quite a bit, actually. Got some nice sweat and dirt from overseas on it.
Speaking of overseas, you did quite a few deployments in your time in the military, in the unit especially, I'm sure. So, what would you say about your experience overseas?
It was real different at the beginning because, being in prior to 9/11, seeing how we were focused on what emerging threats we thought were out there, and then to actually have that threat materialize and then have to deal with it. It was different up front. We were part of, first trip was in Afghanistan in April 2002. So really there was nothing going on at that point. Trying to make things happen and do things and do patrols and get out there and really it was kind of like, battlefield atmospherics. Then we were lucky enough to be in pretty much the lead element for the invasion into Iraq in 2003. So that was pretty neat because we kind of, just set our basically mission essentially, and kind of did our thing as far as what some of the strategic targets they wanted us to identify or actually engage. And then from there we pretty much just traveled the desert for a little over a month, in open skin vehicles and stuff. So it was pretty neat. And then everything started settling into when we went back into Baghdad later, having houses and everything and operating out of the green zone, and then a couple other spots, in and around Iraq. So it was really just going after that intel, finding out what the historical data was. And then from there, developing those threads, all before the newer technologies of how, we can actually process targets or identify those individuals that need to be interdicted. So it was pretty neat to basically be in the wild, wild west.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting way of putting it. The wild, wild west of the Middle East.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you're aware, but just looking at things now and how differently the war is even fought now compared to your time when you were there, it's quite a bit different, isn't it?
Oh yeah. When you look at it, it's so different because of the fact of the targets and how we're prosecuting things. Before, like at Afghanistan, I think you could say we did 4 hits within a 3-month period. Then when we started rolling later into all our deployments, in 120 days, you were going out 75% of the time, sometimes multiple times during that day. So it was a lot of busy work and, just prosecuting those targets, trying to, make things better for everyone.
Yeah, that is a lot of work. And you're obviously going to learn a lot in that process. You're going to learn a lot about, you got to have really good, reliable gear and kit to support that kind of effort, right?
Oh yeah. At that, before the war, which is funny, again, before 9/11, we used to make a lot of our own stuff. So guys would go over to the rigger shed and, we learned how to sew and made a lot of our own stuff. That then industry started catching up and really started making a lot of kit after that. So it made it a lot easier because then, you could get the right kit, just put it together how you wanted versus having to go sew it and do everything. So there was a lot of development early on with some of the armor and, just overall setting up of kit.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Chili. So the movie Extraction, one of the biggest hits I think Netflix has had, and I think part of that's probably thanks to coronavirus. Everybody holed up, and you dump this new movie on people, and they're just like, wow, all right, let's watch this thing. So you've been getting a little attention because people have learned that you were one of the advisors on that production, and so I was kind of curious how that came to be. How'd that fall in your lap?
It is. It's kind of funny. I met a really good friend who is a great friend of today and everything. Basically, one of the producers, Patrick Newell. I met him out in Vegas at SHOT Show through a friend of mine, and his friend brought Patrick to the Cry Party, and we were able to actually, talk a little bit. Just really a quick meeting, and Patrick is just a great guy. Not your typical stereotypical guy you would think, oh, this guy Hollywood, whatever. I mean, he is, just a great American is the easiest way to put it. Just down to earth, just so supportive of the military. And we developed a friendship, and he had been trying to get me involved in a couple adventures or projects. And I did a quick little one with him in 2018 called How It Ends. It was another Netflix film. It was, we filmed it up in Winnipeg, Canada. And then this one came about where he was able to get me in on the second half of basically all the filming out in Thailand. And it was, just went from there. So it was great.
That's awesome. And so, obviously got to work with guys like Chris Hemsworth and others in that film. I mean, how did that go? I mean, so it sounds like you came in a little bit later, though. Like you said, you were more in on the Thailand side of things.
Yes.
And so, were they working with other guys as well, or where'd you interface in that, and like kind of what was your role? What were you actually teaching or advising on?
So I was kind of brought in because of the whole bridge sequence and everything that we're going to be doing. So with that, there were some guys there already that were doing some military advising, and Sean Sweeney was one of the folks up front who has an SF background. So a lot of good things that Sean was doing early on. But then I was able to come in and just kind of really add a little bit more to some of it. But I got to work with Chris, and a lot of things they were in and around or moving in and around the vehicles on the bridge, going up through the bridge, and also with Randeep Huda, who did Saju's character, and had a nice few hours after one of the days of shooting, which you actually worked some good hours, but got some time with him to work a lot more on shooting right-handed and left-handed around his, for him around the cover and concealment and this stuff, the vehicles he was running around. It was great because to be able to take these people a little bit more from what they're used to. I mean, I really don't know how many times he's played with a gun, but it was great to actually see. And he looked good on film doing it. And then I was part of the stunt guys as far as I was riding on the helo. I was on the PKM a little bit. And then from that, I was also one of the mercenaries at the other end with Nick's crew coming in to, get Chris's character out.
Nice. That's awesome, man. So, just a little bit about the gun handling and stuff that was, and the tactics used there in that bridge scene in particular. I mean, what did you find when you arrived, and like, was everybody already doing a pretty good job, or did you have to make some tweaks?
I had to make some tweaks a little bit here and there. I also worked with, there was a lot of Thai stunt personnel that were there for playing all the bad guys on the bridge and stuff. So I worked with them. I worked with Goal, who played Nick in the movie. Worked with her some because that was her first time coming in and actually doing the gun handling during the movie. And then I also worked with Chris's stunt double, Bobby Holland-Hanton, and got a lot of time with him because the stunt guys, you think, oh, they just come in one piece here or there, but they do a lot of work behind the scenes, and they do, a ton of work before the filming even starts. So it was neat to though get him spun up because just get him comfortable moving the gun around, doing everything as well. So and just working with Chris a lot of more of the movement stuff. He already has a strong background, athletic, everything, so it's real easy for him to do a lot with the guns. But just got to kind of refine some of it and going over, really manipulating the selector. You notice one scene, he actually extends the buttstock. So when he was behind a car, little things of nature, just trying to, make it look a little bit better. And then moving it in and around the cars, and how to, if you can see through it, you can most likely shoot through it. So, look at those things, and that cover and concealment are there. But, people always ask too, like when we do VTAC classes or SIG classes and you're shooting in and around cars and they're like, well, if I hide behind the door, the bullet's going to go right through. I said, yeah, but it's thicker than air. You never know. You never know what that bullet's going to do. So it was a lot of things like that and really getting to work right with Chris. And he was, he's that guy that you see that you think, oh, he's a nice guy. Well, he is, and very willing to take criticism, very willing to try what you're saying. And just, a workaholic because he ate his lunch, everything on set on doing all the filming. So it was just a nice to work with people that actually want to do things and not complain about it.
Yeah. So a lot of this instructing, this advising that you were doing, is this primarily all done just right there on set, working with prop guns and that and the like, or is there ever an opportunity to kind of go off site somewhere and do some training?
Everything I did here was all actually on set with prop guns and everything, whether it be some of the rubber guns or just the blank firing. The intent, hopefully, that we do a pretty cool sequel, and I get to be involved from the front because there's a lot that I think we can add to it. Doing a little bit more gun handling with real firearms, because first you get an appreciation, and then you understand a little bit more of why people say this or that when it comes to tactics, especially with guns. And Hollywood's different with the whole animal as far as coming in and trying to set up the tactical play. You still have to also understand the director's vision and then what they're wanting to see at that point, that scene, basically what happens during that scene, as well as where the camera's lighting and everything else go. So it's a little bit of a process. You can't just come in there like you're the first sergeant and then take control.
Right. I'm sure. That's really cool, man. How long did this take to say filming this whole bridge scene?
We were on the bridge for, was it around 2.5, 3 weeks? And before that, in the marketplace, we were at a market for about a week prior to that as well. And then we did some stuff on the backside of the bridge where we were basically the vehicles coming with Nick's crew in it to basically get rake out. Yeah.
So that's a pretty good process. I mean, when you realize altogether, it's like a 15-minute scene, and that's a lot of work that goes into something like that.
Yes, you would not, realize how much goes into it. I mean, it's great though, because it's when you see that final piece now for me to see, a good movie overall, but then see everything kind of come into play. But then you think, man, I was there for a month and wow, we got 15 minutes.
Right. That's fun, man. I mean, did you enjoy your time there?
Oh, I did. It was, I think I was lucky because everybody, from Sam Hargrave on down was just great to work with, and being a part of the stunt crew under Daniel Stevens was awesome because all the guys were from all over the world, but they were it was kind of like that team atmosphere again. So I felt like I was back in a team room, and, guys that were willing to listen, wanted to talk and chatting, and I developed some friendships out of it. So I really enjoyed working with all the folks I did.
That's fun. That's good. So kind of a little bit of a segue here, talking about working around vehicles. So I'm reminded of the course that Jacob and I both had the opportunity to come and take with you and Kyle at Sig Sauer Academy. In fact, I think that was one of the, if it wasn't the first, it was one of the first courses, if I'm not mistaken, that was done in that new indoor 50-meter range. which was great because we were doing a low light course in a
Yep.
controlled environment. So you switch off the lights. I mean, it's dark. It's not even starlight. It's black. Uh, and then we had the opportunity, obviously, to pull the car out and do some work around that in a low light situation as well. So I had a great time, and it was a great class. I learned a ton. I didn't have a lot of opportunities prior to that to do. I mean, I've done some vehicle stuff, but definitely not doing a lot of vehicle stuff in the pitch black like that. So that was a great class. What would you say? I mean, relevant to our audiences as citizen concealed carriers. People spend a lot of time in their vehicles. What are kind of some thoughts, some ideas that you have to maybe help your everyday civilian Joe, going out there commuting to work, that sort of thing, to just be a little bit more prepared, a little bit more capable of defending himself in the event something were to happen while he's in his vehicle?
I look at it kind of like over time, everybody learns how to use their seatbelt without looking at it, and they can get in, buckle up and unbuckle without having to worry about it or even think twice about it. So I think it's understanding what room you have within your vehicle, where you can actually place them, what you can move in and around, and, actually think about it. Sit in your vehicle. You don't have to go out there and drive around to do it, but just sit in it and think, okay, if somebody approached me from, the driver's side when I'm driving, what can I do and what can be my movements within the vehicle to where if I had to draw my pistol, and also, of course, where did I have my pistol at that point? So I think just understanding really your environment with it. It's kind of like, going into when you go in the military, even just training wise, like flying on helos and stuff, you always go over emergency procedures, jumping within the military. Every day you do your pre-jump brief. So you go over those emergency procedures. So understanding essentially, what's in and around you in your vehicle, I think are those emergency procedures.
That's a great place to start. I liken it to, something we talk about on the podcast from time to time, and in some other content that we've generated is, grabbing something like a SIRT pistol or a prop gun or something, to where you're 100% safe. You can't make any mistakes, and that's the big thing. Is like there's no risk involved, and so you can really kind of experiment and try some things and be a little bit more bold too, and kind of go, okay, all right, I'm in my vehicle. Let's think through this strategically and analytically, and then let's maybe try some things. And how I carry, say 4 o'clock or something, a little bit behind the hip. Well, have you practiced drawing out from that position? How does that go? Do you have a cover garment in place? How does that interface with the seatbelt? Is the seatbelt in the way? All that stuff. So, I think it's a great opportunity to, in a no risk environment, just sitting in your garage, maybe, doing it outside and next to a park might get a little attention as you're swinging a blue gun or something around inside your vehicle.
Yeah.
But, do it in a safe place and like Chili just said, give it some thought, look at your environment and how you're interacting with that environment. Good stuff, brother. As it relates to, you made a great point just a moment ago, using a vehicle in the event that you had to get out of that vehicle, or just, maybe you're attacked while you're at the gas station. So you're already outside a vehicle, and all of a sudden something's going down, working around a vehicle. Like what is, I mean, like you said, hey, if I got a door, I got a door. It's better than air. But what's the ideal situation to find yourself in when working around a vehicle?
Well, ideally is the fact that you are the one not having to react, but you're the one actually, being able to dictate the situation. But I mean, 9 times out of 10, especially in the civilian world, you're the one reacting to a threat because all of a sudden there's an immediate threat upon you. So, if anything, if you can get standoff from that threat, I think, and whether that be move around the vehicle or being able to just back up and take some sort of cover, even if it's like at a gas station, you got to understand what is cover, what's concealment, but then also what is not something I want to get behind, like a gas pump. I mean, you kind of want to have an idea. Not saying that you have to go everywhere, go there and sit there every place you go and say, what would I do here? I mean, we know we're not going to think that every time we stop somewhere. But just to get an idea in your head, though, if you were around a gas station or even just a convenience store, where could you hide? Could you use something to see to the next aisle in a store, like reflections off some of the freezer, the doors and everything else? So get an idea of what's there. I would say it's definitely not going to hurt you when you walk in somewhere and say, okay, like in a theater, where's my exit? But where can I go in here? What's this store layout? And over time, you're in the same store multiple times. You get an idea, and you already know kind of that background. But if you go somewhere new, think about it. It's a lot like trying to do stairs as far as in CQB. Go somewhere when you go to a hotel, when you go to a movie theater, maybe there might be stairs, who knows what, but look at those stairs and think, how would I be able to go up and down these safely if there's somebody shooting at me from either above me or below me? So it's kind of like that, just be ready, just think and be aware of where you're at and what you're doing, especially if you're going to, have a concealed carry. You have to be switched on to begin with. You're not just having it for the heck of it. You're having it for a reason. And first you have to be safe, know how to use it, and be able to think. And I think if you can, get around and get standoff and use the car, you can crouch behind a car, still being able to see over it. If you can't see over it because the way the threat was, you can still see from underneath it. If you look in the movie as well, he shot over top, got the guys to push down below, raked it, and then underneath the vehicle, skipped some rounds into them, and then be able to come around the backside. Yeah. Granted, that's a little bit different as far as, more of that military style of piece, but you can still move like that in and around the vehicle. And if you can keep situational awareness of where that threat is, I think that's key.
Mm. That's a great point. And being aware of that environment, the resources you have available, how you can use them to your advantage, because regardless of military or civilian context, if you're faced with a threat, the goal is to end the threat.
Right. You want to eliminate that threat and as fast as you can, but do it in a manner that you're not just, you're still accountable for your rounds no matter which way you look at it.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And that, that's something that, speaking of training with you and Kyle, I mean, accountability rounds is a really important thing. I mean, there was drills we would do that you'd have us redo because we'd look at targets and go, that wasn't good, brother. So,
yeah.
what do you see as, you spend a lot of time behind a gun, right? So what are some of the biggest mistakes people make with shooting a gun? Let's be maybe more pistol focused because this is more concealed carry, content here. But I mean, what are some of the biggest mistakes you see people make?
There's so many different ways to look at that. I think when it comes to, people with concealed carry, I think that the biggest thing they think is they practice the draw once or twice and they're done with it. And then they're like, yeah, I'm good anytime. And like you were mentioning, different clothes, seatbelts, things like that in vehicle. But I think it's understanding, and practicing no matter what. Basically, okay, hey, do I have my holster at 4:00? Do I have it, located on my opposite hip for some reason? Who knows what went on? But you got to be able to practice. And I think people just take it for granted. They're just like, well, I'm just going to carry my gun because I can carry my gun, and not understand really what to do. And that people, when they get close, they think, oh, I can just point the gun and shoot. At no time should you ever be engaging any sort of threat unless you can see your sights. You still have to see your sights. And if you practice that fundamental and doing it right, of no matter what you're doing and how you get that gun out, if you focus on your sights and seeing the threat, you're going to eliminate that threat a lot sooner than if you just start pointing the gun out there. And then you may not be accountable for those rounds as far as not knowing where they're at. Kind of like some of the drills where you had to do over.
Right. Now, I'd like to believe that most of my hits counted, for the record, but
of course they did.
But did I miss some? Of course I missed some. Absolutely. Speaking of accountability too, I mean, like even just talking about working around a vehicle. Now it's probably more of an issue with a carbine where you've got such a height over bore related to your optics or your sights. But you got to be accountable there too, because if you're shooting off the grill of the vehicle, then you're not getting the job done either.
Correct. Yeah, you got to be able to, just because your sights are seeing the target, is your barrel.
Yeah, yeah. One thing too that's eye opening when you go through a vehicle course is, and while you may be using a range vehicle that's been out there, it's been getting dragged around in the dirt and the mud and whatnot, so it might be a little bit more prone to this. But all vehicles pick up dirt and stuff, and you don't
Yes.
realize how much dirt is underneath the vehicle till you let off a few rounds underneath that vehicle, and then all of a sudden your vision is clouded.
Yes, especially if you have a nice muzzle brake. You
Right.
might. Yeah, we've seen some folks with some really nice muzzle brakes, and then we're like, all right, yeah, enjoy it under the car. And then they put it under the car, and they look like they had rust sprayed right on their face because all the rust from the car came down on them. So,
Yep.
it,
Fun times. Back to the accountability piece, though. You talked about the importance of you can't address the threat with the gun. You can't, you don't shoot the threat until you can see your sights on that threat. That I am convinced is probably next to trigger control is probably one of the biggest challenges people have with regards to being accountable for all the rounds they fire. And by accountable, I mean like every time that gun is fired, and this is something I've been working on with myself more and more recently too. It's always been a thing, but I've been actually very specifically working on this skill in my recent trips to the range and stuff. And that is on calling my shots, meaning that knowing where that shot is going because of where my sights were on the target at the time the round was fired. That's for me at least, and I assume it's probably true for most people, and I assume that you know what I'm talking about here, but that is a really difficult thing for me to I guess I would say truly master. Like I understand the concept, I execute it pretty well a lot of the time, but there's times where you want to go fast and then you kind of lose sight of the sights, or you pay
yeah,
attention to where they're at on the target.
no,
What
exactly.
So what would you say to someone that particularly if you don't have the opportunity like some guys? I mean, you on the teams, like you spend a lot of time on Delta team putting rounds down range. I've talking with Kyle, reading literature and stuff. Like you guys spend a lot of time being accountable. Like that's probably actually what I remember from. What's the book? I'm trying to think of the name of the book now. I'm drawing a blank. But what I remember the most about some of what you guys experience in your training is that there can be zero misses. Is
Oh
that
yeah.
that's true, right? So like if there's a miss, like somebody is getting a butt chewing in a big way and maybe even getting booted, right?
Yeah, I mean it's when you look at, again, going back to the accountability, it is a miss. I mean that can't happen because of the fact during some of these situations where you're shooting around people that aren't the threat. So you have to know that your rounds are doing what they're intended and they're going where they need to, because yeah, a miss is detrimental. I mean, that could be someone else's life. So it is a huge thing to be very accurate and know where those shots were. Like you said, calling your shots, you have to. Yeah, when you're out there practicing, no, it's like, oh yeah, I know I jerked that one. Yep, that it got away from me a little high. And the more you shoot and the more you start being aware of your sights, your trigger control, and thinking through that as you're shooting as well, then you'll know and be able to call those shots a little bit sooner. I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is what I've become convinced of, is that I can't be truly fully accountable for my rounds fired if I don't, in the moment the trigger is pressed, know precisely where that's going. And so as an instructor working with students of my own, I like to start people slow, obviously a little bit. We usually start with some kind of accuracy drill because I believe you've got to be able to shoot accurately before we can really start doing anything at speed. Because going fast is not going to do anybody any good if you don't even have the base fundamentals of how to put a round where you intend to. But then as we start stepping things forward, of course, we always want to push students a little bit, right? That's the whole point, is to
Mhm.
encourage that growth. And growth doesn't happen where we're not challenged. But, as we start advancing along, there comes a point where you start to lose a little bit of control, I think. Um, Now we start talking about maintaining control, being able to call those shots, let's say, uh, and do it under pressure, right? How would you say? I mean, what are some ideas that you have for someone? I mean, as someone that has been in high pressure situations for much of your career, uh, how do we get to a point where we don't just master some of these fundamentals on a flat square range with no pressure? What can particularly civilians do you think, to kind of help prepare oneself? Again, we're not stepping out on the battlefield, right? So it's still a different context, but there's still things I believe we can do to be a little bit more prepared to handle the stress of a situation. What do you think?
Yeah, it's hard when you don't have everything or a free range that you could just kind of run around on and still being in a safe manner. But I think for folks, time is always, it's an easy one to put yourself on. But knowing that you're being judged off of time, sometimes folks just automatically stress themselves out. It's kind of like having to study for a test.
Yeah.
There's other, factors that you can do too. You can, if you can't move around on your range based off the restrictions, nothing says you can't do, a bunch of push-ups until you're starting to really have muscle failure on that. Then come up, put yourself on time, because you're already tired. Your heart's already beating, things are going, and now you've got to perform in that manner on time. If you have the ability to actually move around the range, moving and shooting, setting up a nice drill to where you're actually running and going into different positions or around different, settings, as far as maybe a vehicle, a VTAC barricade, barrels. But then you're shooting around right-handed and left-handed as well. But time's going to be that good measure, because we all want to perform under time. And what really helps for accountability is having a buddy there with you.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Have you ever shot competitions?
I shot a few. Kyle used to run a 3-gun out in North Carolina, and it was the first time stepping up at one of those, shooting in front of all these other people, was pretty nerve-wracking. So if folks can get out there to do it and realize, it's kind of like giving a oral presentation the first time in school. You just understand it's just you, and it doesn't matter what anybody else is doing. You're there to do what you need to do. And if you can just realize that, hey, it doesn't matter what all these other people think or see, you run through what you need to based off your fundamentals without trying to, let the wheels fall off. Over time, you'll just get used to shooting around people, and then it can become fun. And a lot of people pick it up and actually enjoy, going out there and doing competitions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I got into officially shooting competitions about 4, maybe a little more than 4 years ago, and it's done wonders for No longer am I as timid or intimidated, to get in front of people and perform, with a gun in my hand, and I don't know, I enjoy it. I think it's also fun. It's just a fun way to enjoy shooting a gun and work on developing skills as well. You talked about running around, doing some physical exertions when training. Is that something do you still actively train on a regular basis, Chili?
Yeah, I try to. The lucky side is my stepson and I put a gym together a few years ago out here where we live in Virginia. So with this COVID, we still have some physical fitness stuff. But to me, it is a big part of my life still. It was growing up playing sports. You just take it for granted. You never want to do it, and you don't see the benefits of it. But then going into the military, it's a way of life, because you can't expect yourself just to go out there and put on this kit and run around and be okay. You've got to train to be able to, have 70 pounds of stuff strapped to your body, and then get out there and still perform, in a very different situation, or unique, environment. So I do try to, maintain, some sort of cardiovascular. It seems like it gets harder and harder as we get older, but then, I enjoy going to the gym. At least if I can go 5-6 times a week, then I feel good. And my wife knows it's my stress release. So she's very supportive of that.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. I was thinking too about my own experience with training and trying to exert myself. What I feel slips the most is not so much that I can't continue to hold my gun and press the trigger, and shoot at a target, but that when we get, so correct me if I'm wrong anywhere, but when we get tired, when we get, where we've been working really hard, we're breathing hard, the adrenaline maybe is going, the heart's pumping, all that stuff, I feel like it's a little bit easier to maybe not focus on some of those finer detail things, like say sights.
Yeah, exactly. And I did that with bow. One of the when I first time I went bow hunting was a couple of years ago. I was with Kyle. We went out to Wyoming, and it was for elk. And so one of the things we were talking about was Kyle was like, "Oh, yeah, when that elk comes in, your heart's going to be pounding through your chest, so you need to kind of practice for it." So one of the things that was brought up to us by another guy, Daryl, that did some courses with us in Florida, big archery competition and hunter, and he was like, "Go do." Run your laps, put an arrow at like 20 yards, put an arrow at 30, run back and forth to where you're basically doing your, shuttle run type thing. Yep. And then be able to get the heart going and then focus because, with the bow, of course, you're focusing on those pins, which is the same as looking at iron sights really on any pistol or rifle. What I'd like to do is I'd go to the gym, do a good workout, come right back to where I'm still, my arms or my wrists are still, kind of, or tired from everything, and then get on the bow, because then it's like, okay, you still now have to focus on those fundamentals. Because I think if you are, used to focusing on those fundamentals, do some exertion like that, do something to get the heart rate up. The biggest thing to calm yourself down, and what I think about it as well, is those steps that I need to do to get the pistol out, especially, and to see my sights and maintain that trigger manipulation and, maintain my grip throughout. Because for me, growing up, I taught myself how to shoot. So of course, I had no problems. I was good, but so I had some really bad habits. And to me, I can jerk the heck out of a trigger. I can miss it 5 yards. So that was something I had to cope with a lot, was focusing on that trigger manipulation, trigger pull. And I think, if you're out there doing some exercise, huffing and puffing, come back when you then put yourself under time, but just focus on the fundamentals, and then everything else will fall in line. Yeah. If you're doing it correctly.
Yeah. I've been incorporating, so I've been working on my pistol training and incorporating movement into that and stuff, and I've been doing kind of just some shuttle runs back and forth with my gun in hand, just in my basement here. I've got a pretty nice I got a long run in my basement, and what I have found is now, especially if I do it with, I got a P320 X5 Legion, which is that heavy bugger. It's 43 and a half ounces or whatever. That one in particular, that gun, I like running with that one because, and that's my competition gun these days too, because, I'll go back and forth, and I'll get, a good 5, 6, 7 runs in, and then you extend out to target, and that 43 and a half ounces feels like a small kettlebell out there as you're trying to press the trigger.
Yep, it definitely can. I mean, it's, and I like to, also like go out there with I've got the P365 that I carry when I go out, and I like to then actually get worn out, especially like after doing some arms exercises, go out there, because your grip is already tired, and now you've got to get this small little gun out of this holster and get it up there and hold it. But yeah, I think, just realizing where you're at, what you're doing, and trying to, it all leads back to the fundamentals of focusing on those fundamentals and knowing what works for you, because everybody says, oh, you need this much trigger. Or if somebody's telling you, hey, this is the correct trigger position. No, it's all about what works for you. So find out where you can, still get everything as far as lined up, holster wise, everything else that you need. And then when you're actually pulling out the gun, maintaining your best grip, your best positioning to where you can acquire the sights and be able to engage accurately.
Yeah, I agree with that. Absolutely. To your point, it is what works for you, especially with something, like that, with the trigger press, or the finger position on the trigger. What is important is we all have to press the trigger the same way, as far as we can't move the gun as we're doing it.
Yeah, 100%.
So, yeah. So we can't let a guest on the Concealed Carry podcast get away without asking. You just spilled a little bit of the beans there. You like to carry the P365. That's a great gun. I've got one and have carried it many times. Although I have since kind of moved to the XL version of it. I like that little bit larger frame on that gun. But where do you carry? What kind of holster are you using? That sort of thing.
Right now I've got the 365, like I said, and I carry it about 4 o'clock. I just like it because I can carry it easily. I've been using some Blackhawk holsters as well as one of the sticky holsters that I have, because that works great for me, especially if I'm getting in and out of my car a lot. And so I have the ability to shoot at home, which is great. So I do practice with those holsters because, I went out there just last week, and I think about 250 rounds just out of the concealed draw, because I just wanted to go out there and do everything, because it's like, especially again, like we talked about, if you're carrying it, you got to know how to use it and use it safely and be accurate with it and accountable. So I like, because I don't have to take my gun out of the holster. When I go in the vehicle, it's always right there. And I know if I go to my seatbelt, it's the same as if with my left hand going, then I'm going to remove my garment to get my right hand on the gun anyway. So to me, I'm removing the seatbelt. I can grab my garment and lift it up and still get a good draw, even from in the vehicle.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. And then, and I saw just yesterday, actually, a press release that Kyle's working with Black Point Tactical on a new holster design. So is that something that interests you at all, or you gonna stick with what you know?
No, it does interest me. I'm willing to try things. I'm kind of that that kit guy as well, where I like to try everything. And Kyle, I was speaking with him the other day. He's like, "Oh yeah, I got to get you some of those." So this is another reminder to Kyle that I'm waiting on my care package.
All right. Well, Kyle, if you're listening, you better get on that, buddy. What kind of sidearms did you carry when you were still operational?
We started when I first got there. We had the Caspian 45s, and that's what I cut my teeth on when I got up to Bragg. And for me, I've always loved the 45. And then it was great. I loved that gun still. Yeah, it's heavy. It's, minimal round count and everything. And when we started seeing operational wise, it's pretty stout little gun, and the amount of magazines you got to carry on your leg when you're running around in altitude in Afghanistan. Then we all started carrying, a lot of people went to their Glock. So we had the Glock 19. And then that's pretty much what I carried all throughout. I had kind of an older canvas style holster, or not canvas, but it kind of looked like some of the old World War II canvas with the flap over. And I modified that to fit my Glock with the light and everything. Again, remember, we learned how to sew. But I carried that on my leg still. A lot of guys went up to, chest rigs and stuff on their kit. I just was always more familiar with it being on my leg, because I knew I'd always default there. I have seen people at times, oh, where's my gun? Not out there during operations, but if you have somebody switch up their routine of where they're normally carrying, and then have them run a drill, let's see where they actually try to draw from.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that's a fair point. I like to try to be consistent as well. So I don't know, maybe 3 years ago now. It's been a while. I switched from kind of like you, about 4 o'clock, 3:30, 4 o'clock, somewhere around there, to appendix pretty much 99% of the time now, as I've found that now works for me and works better for me in a variety of situations. But it took a while to to really ingrain that to make sure that, that became the default as opposed to the old way.
Yeah, I think I just got stuck in my ways. That's why I like it around there.
Well, and I'll tell you, I know that I've put in the work to make that transition to appendix when my draw time is faster from concealment appendix than it is from an open 3 o'clock holster with standoff, like on the
Wow,
holster. Like
that's great.
So as I started shooting a little bit more competitively, and then I'd go to draw, and I'm like, why am I so much slower coming from a much easier holster? And
That's funny.
it's just what you put in, the time, the effort, the work, I think. So
Yep,
anyway,
that's very true. You just got to be, you put in the work, but it's got to be the, not just practice, but the perfect practice.
that's right. Well, as we're kind of coming up here on the hour, Chili, I mean, if you were to leave, and this could be about anything, it could be life, if you want to go all philosophical on us, it could be training, it could be shooting, it could be maybe there's an aspiring, a service member out there in our audience today that whatever. If you were to offer words of advice as we kind of parting words here, what would you say?
I think we, especially in this day and age with everything going on, we have to look at really those first responders, everybody out there, military, law enforcement and firefighters, paramedics, everybody, because of the fact is they're doing the job that we all kind of, we take our day-to-day life for granted. I have my son, he's in the military, he's been in some of the places I've been, he's been in the military 5 years. So it's different when, we've been at war for so long as well that, the threat is real. And, these people are still volunteering to do the things at home as well as, abroad. So I just think we need to really, thank all the first responders and just understand that, we can't be safe if they're not out there doing the job.
Amen to that. That's a great place to end right there, Chili. Thank you for saying that, and also thank you for all the many years of service that you offered to us as a people and as a nation. I really appreciate everything that you've done, the sacrifices made, and others like you and others that maybe did not come home.
Thank you. Yeah.
So thank you, Chili. Well, guys, that's going to wrap it up for this episode here today. We thank you all for joining us and being with us. Now, Chili is actually going to come back and be a part of a Guardian Nation live event, which actually, when we get done here, we're going to lock down exactly what day that's going to be. But for those of you that are Guardian Nation members, you can look forward to associating with Chili a little bit more and face-to-face and asking questions in our usual Guardian Nation live format that many of you are familiar with. So appreciate Chili for coming back for that. And it's been a great episode. I mean, lots of words of wisdom, Chili, and great advice, and of course, some entertainment as well, just learning about stuff behind the scenes with this new movie, and hope to, that you have much greater success in the future, that you have other great opportunities, and that you enjoy and find happiness in all that you pursue.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on, and just really appreciate everything that everybody else does out there for us all. So thank you.
Yeah. So one last call out to today's episode sponsors, mountainmanmedical.com, and also the Foundation Belt by EDC Belt Company, which of course can be found at concealedcarry.com/foundation. And so with that, that's a wrap for another episode of the Concealed Carry Podcast. We'll be back here Thursday at the usual time, so we hope to see you all then. And until then, train right, train often, and train safe so you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true. Take care.